All right. I am thrilled to be here today. I haven't been in Arizona for probably 5 years, and so it's really great to see this room full of people. I'm okay? Okay. Yes? I never know if I should break out in song when I have one of these in my face, or if I should keep talking. So I am really super excited to be here today. I started my career as a special education teacher a really long time ago. And it was before transition, before integrated employment was even a discussion. And I taught kids with significant disabilities, whatever that means. I never know what that really means for people. But I taught in the basement of a high school next to the engineer's office. So that'll tell you how long ago I taught. And 3 of my students, one of whom used a wheelchair and used an augmentative communication not as sophisticated as today's device, and 2 young people with autism who were both nonverbal, graduated high school. And I was told that, first of all, they couldn't walk across the stage with the rest of their peers. And secondly, they were all going to be relegated to segregated facility-based services because there's nothing else for them. Now, what you have to understand is that when I was teaching, I had my students in the community 100% of the time. They worked at the VA hospital, and not doing food and filth, but they worked in central supply. They worked in laundry and linen. They worked in medical records. They worked in all the different departments. They worked at the Marcus Corporation, in the theaters, and not just in cleaning up the theaters after we make it a mess after we see a movie, but they actually learned the projection booth, and they learned how to do the tickets, and they learned all sorts of different things. So they had better resumes than most of their non-disabled peers. And I say that because it's so important to understand that because they had these awesome resumes with 3 years of lots of work experiences, we were still told that they didn't have the skills and abilities to work in the community. So I got frustrated, and 28 years ago started an employment agency that transitioned youth from school to work, because I thought this was such an important issue. Why are we doing what we're doing in schools? What's the purpose of education, if not to develop the skills and talents and abilities of young people so that they can be contributing members to our community? So 28 years ago, we're still around. People told me it would never last. And now I'm fortunate enough to be part of this great organization based out in Rockville, Maryland, called Transcend. And so my agency in Wisconsin still provides integrated employment opportunities, and I still participate. I still job development. I have a small little caseload. We also have an employment service in Maryland and also in California. So we can, across the board, kind of talk about all of the different things that we're doing. And so all of the stories I'm going to be talking about, and I really like that, Dr. How, that's kind of cool. We're going to talk about how we can help individuals with significant disabilities move from where they are to integrated employment, whether that's school or segregated services or sitting at home, quite frankly. So here are the ground rules, is I do want you to ask questions. The last thing I want whenever I do these presentations is for people to leave here and say, that was great, but I can never do that where I am. There's always a possibility. There's always ways to do it. We just have to think differently, just like Administrator Trainer talked about. We want to challenge your thinking. So really, don't say, well, yeah, but, those yeah, butters, think differently about what you can do, and even if it's a small little change that you can do, think about that, and then think about how rather than can. How can we do this? How can somebody get a job, even somebody with the most significant disability, rather than can they be employed? I love this quote by Ken Steele. It's a great book, The Day the Voices Stopped. It's about folks with mental health issues, but the quote I think really resonates for anybody. If people are treated as capable, they often surprise everyone and live up to those expectations. For me, it's all about expectations. For me, it's about the fact that employment should be an expectation. And when we talk about this idea of choice, choice is a very narrow concept. If the only ideas and experiences you have are segregated, or the only experiences and expectations that people have for you are segregated, or that you're not able to or you can't, So the expectation for employment should be there for every person, everybody. It shouldn't be the exception. So here's what I hear when I go around the country. I'm fortunate enough, again, to work for Transcend, and we're part of NTACT, the National Transition, I never know what it's called, the National Transition Technical Assistance Center, NTACT. We're part of a bunch of other large organizations, and we go around the country and we help states and organizations and people really think differently. And here are the things that I continue to hear, and these are the things that I hear even in Wisconsin every day when I talk with my teachers and I talk with voc rehab providers, is that Social Security told me I can't work, or you're just not job ready. Job readiness. Oh, that is one thing. If you can leave here today and never say those words, that would be like awesome for me. There's no such thing as job readiness. Think about what that means. The expectation of being job ready. How many people in here were job ready for the job that they have right now? There's always one. Most of us were not job ready. Most of us learned how to do the job by doing the job. We had skills, we brought in experiences, and we had something to offer, but we learned to do that job by doing the job, by being part of that business. Nobody is job ready. We all learn by doing the job. That there are no jobs. I hear that a lot, but there are. Even in times of recessions, employers are looking for people who can do good work. People are always looking for employees who are going to be good employees. You're better off not working, primarily because of Social Security issues, or you'll lose your health insurance, or you'll lose your benefits. All of these things are not really true if we think differently about employment, if we look differently about how we expect people with disabilities to work in the community. And so really what the message needs to be is, I think I should go to work. And that's the message we want individuals with disabilities to be graduating high school, to be leaving school and saying, I need a job, to be employed while they're in high school. So the dignity of work, we all know this, but I just want to set the stage because it's so important. I just have to tell you, this is Jenna. Jenna is an amazing young woman. I'll talk about her a little bit later, but I should have put this when I talk about her story, but she works in a K-4 program in a public school, and she's an assistant. But she calls herself a co-teacher. So because she called herself a co-teacher, you can see that the 4K kindergarten, we've got the teacher, Melissa, and then we've got Jenna right underneath there. So she's got her name on the classroom door as the co-teacher. But the dignity of work, it strengthens sense of self and competency. It gives you self-worth. It makes you feel like a human being, that you can give back, that you can contribute. And one of the things I hear a lot from people with disabilities is that they never have that opportunity to give back, to be part of their community. The first time this young woman got her first paycheck, she said, I would like to take you out to lunch. And I said, oh no, you don't have to do that. And she said, no, I want to take you out to lunch. And I said, no, you really don't have to do that. She said, you don't understand, I never ever got to take somebody out to lunch before. I want to pay for lunch for somebody. I mean, that's what's the dignity of work, to be able to be competent, to be able to say, I can take somebody out to lunch, to be able to strengthen your sense of self, your self-esteem. That's what's tied into work. What's the first thing people ask you when they meet you? What do you do, right? My flight here, every flight that I took, everybody asked me, so what are you going out to Arizona for? What do you do? Where you going to Las Vegas? What are you doing? I sat next to police officers. I sat next to business people. They asked me, and they're kind of sorry after they ask me what I do for a living, because they're stuck with me for at least 2 hours on the plane. But I want them to know the importance of work. It builds community. Really, work builds community. The dignity of work builds community. Because now we've got people who have disposable revenues, disposable income. They can participate in their community. They have friends on the job. They have people that they can connect with. So they're building that sense of community. No longer do we have these isolated groups of people segregated altogether. We've got people who are now part of the community, who are building friendships, who are being part of businesses. And then finally, it empowers people. It empowers people because money builds power. Money builds control. When you get that paycheck and you can buy somebody lunch, that's powerful. So it empowers people. So we know this inherently. Every person in this room I know knows this. But I think sometimes we forget, particularly with people with more significant disabilities, that these same things still apply. That self-esteem, that competency, that sense of I can do this, that community building, that I am part of my community, I'm part of a bigger group, and then that empowerment. I love this cartoon because this is really what this is all about. Times are changing. We are so excited that times are finally changing. So you can see on the bottom it says, can you believe it? Grandpa writes his emails on paper. So if you think about technology in and of itself, this is what we're talking about with employment. We're talking about times are changing and we have to change. We will go by the way of the dinosaurs if we don't. We have to change our thought process and our beliefs and our expectations that individuals with disabilities can and should work. So here are some of the drivers of change. We have a lot of them, quite honestly. Historically, we have had a lot of drivers of change. In 1938, we had the Fair Labor Standards Act, which kind of set the stage, saying that we want to make sure people are paid a fair wage. In 1973, we had the Rehabilitation Act, which actually started out for soldiers and then evolved into 1973, where we included civilians with disabilities. In 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the huge Civil Rights Act for people with disabilities. We have a whole generation of people who are now part of the ADA. They were born and they don't know anything different. Yet, really, what has the ADA done? It's opened doors, but have we really included, have we really allowed people with disabilities to enter through those doors? I don't think so, not yet. 28 years ago, we opened the doors. We opened the doors with the ADA, but we need to figure out how we get people with disabilities through those doors now. I work with a young woman who is blind. She has a law degree from Berkeley. 500 job applications. Nobody would hire her. So we haven't really gotten to where we need to be yet. The ADA was this great promise, but I think, again, expectations have kind of held people with disabilities down. In 1997, we have IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which really set the stage for, thank you, for transition. So now we say, okay, this employment idea of getting people on the job in the community, that needs to start in school. We need to start looking at that in school with transition. In 1998, Workforce Investment Act, and then the Olmstead decision in 1999, huge decision. Huge decision because it really said that people with disabilities have the right to be integrated in their communities. They have the right to live in their communities, not in institutional settings. And as part of that Olmstead decision, we have now realized that we can use the Olmstead decision for employment. That there's no difference, that segregation is segregation, whether it's in employment or residential or in the community. Doesn't matter. So the Olmstead decision in 1999 is still being used today to kind of help us think differently about integration. Then, of course, we have all the amendments for IDEA and ADA, then the Affordable Care Act, and 2014. So this is the creme de la creme. So we thought the ADA was the Americans with Disabilities Act, but I think the Workforce Investment Opportunity Act is the bee's knees. I think this is where we are going to be able to make a difference because it requires us to work together. It requires schools to work with employers, to work with VR, to work with DD. It requires collaboration, and collaboration is not easy. But it says that we can no longer look at people with disabilities and put these low expectations on them. It says that individuals with disabilities need to, in school, start looking at employment through pre-employment transition services. So things are really finally coming together for us. The ADA, just want to reiterate the purpose. The nation's proper goals regarding individuals with disabilities are to assure equality of opportunity, full participation, independent living, and economic self-sufficiency. 1990. This is what we said we wanted the ADA to do. 28 years later, we're not there yet. I think with the combination of the ADA and WIOA, we will get there. This is our time. We have to take this time to help people with disabilities understand that they live in our society. They are citizens of our communities. And as a result, we have to maintain those high expectations to support them, because economic self-sufficiency cannot happen unless somebody has a job. Full participation in independent living cannot happen unless people are employed. You have to have money in order to participate in the community. You have to have money to live independently. So really important that 28 years later, we gotta revisit this. Employment first, and congratulations, I know Arizona is an employment first state. Employment first really is just looking at the fact that there is a job for everybody, regardless of their disability and regardless of their need for support. It doesn't matter. Because quite honestly, if you think about it, we are all supported employees and we all have customized jobs. Everyone in this room needs support on their job. Think about the people who support you on the job. Your coworkers, the secretary, the janitor, your husband or significant other or wife, your family. Everybody needs support on the job, and we all have customized jobs, quite honestly. How many people in here have job descriptions? Raise your hand. If you're with your boss, you should probably raise your hand. And of you who have raised your hand that you have a job description, how many know exactly what it says? Again, if you're with your boss, please raise your hand. Okay, so fewer people. So of those few people who have raised their hand saying that, yes, I have a job description, and yes, I know exactly what it says, how many of you do everything equally well on that job description? Right. You know why? Because we all have customized jobs. We have a job description. We were hired to do a job, but that employer then saw something in us that said, John, I don't want you to do these things. I want you to focus on this because you're really good at it. And so I know you got a job description that has these other 15 things. I want you to concentrate on these two. Because I see talent in him in a different way. We're all customized employees. We all have supported jobs, right? And that is why employers have probationary periods too, so that they can look and see, what are the talents that this person brings? How can this person benefit my business? And so we have to change our thought to really looking at how do we help employers think differently about somebody who might look differently, or who might act differently, or who might speak differently, or communicate differently. It's all about education, and it's all about helping people with disabilities know that they have an expectation to promote themselves as well. So employment first is critical. This movement towards employment first, towards community integration and competitive integrated employment, not likely to turn back, folks. It's going to be here. The puzzle piece, everything's coming together. It's going to be here. Yes, John?
I'm sorry, but is Employment First a program? I've never heard of it.
Oh, okay. No, Employment First is not a program. Thank you for asking that. I apologize. I thought people knew, so thank you for asking that. Employment First is an initiative. So I think all 50 states at this point have some kind of initiative. Some have executive orders from their governors, some have policy statements, some have legislation. But it's basically a policy statement that doesn't have a lot of teeth, as most policy statements have not a lot of teeth. But it kind of sets the stage for policies for all of the different government organizations and people working together, saying this, that, and in most states it says that public dollars will go towards integrated employment. That's really kind of the bottom line of Employment First initiatives. And the reality is, the reason Employment First is so important is because you get what you pay for. So I come from Wisconsin, where for years everybody was like, oh, Wisconsin's so progressive. We had Lou Brown from the University of Madison. We're not that progressive, because it was the same kind of thing. Like, we want integrated employment. We want supported employment in the 80s when supported employment first came into the law. And yet, all of the dollars being spent was going to segregated services. So you can say all you want, that you want integrated employment, but if you don't put your money where your mouth is, if you don't pay for what you want, then it's all for naught. And so that's really the crux of Employment First, is that public dollars are to be spent on what we want, which is competitive integrated employment. So thank you for asking that. So this movement, again, it's not going to go backwards. I think we're going to continue moving forward. The economic opportunity and work parity are fundamental to achieving full citizenship. Again, I go back to my high school days with my students, and I think, what is the purpose of education? Every high school student asks that, right? Every high school student says, what is the purpose? Why do I have to be here? And wow, wouldn't it be great to say, so that you can get a job and so that you can earn a lot of money? That is the purpose. And it's the purpose for people with disabilities as well, because we want to kind of merge that economic parity. We want them to be able to be self-sufficient. We don't want them. I think it's just sad that we still have this discussion today about Social Security. That really what we're telling young adults and adults is, stay home, be poor. That's what we're saying. I mean, SSI benefits, $750 a month. How many people in here can live on that? Right, but yet we expect people with disabilities to. Why? I think that's just wrong. And so sometimes I think we are the enemy and he is us. We need to change that. We need to help people with disabilities out of this dilemma of having to live in poverty for the rest of their lives. Now, granted, I know that's a simplistic way of looking at it, and there's lots of issues. There's health insurance that's attached to SSI. I understand that. But if we don't fix it, and if we don't try to work through those challenges, if we don't figure out a way to utilize Social Security work incentives to benefit individuals with disabilities, then we're always going to have that argument that you really can't work. Stay home, collect your $700+ a month, and be happy. And the people with disabilities I work with don't want that. My dear friend Cindy Bentley grew up in an institution, worked her way out, pushed her way out of that institution, said to me when I first met her, I don't want a dead-end job. My job, I want my career to be helping people with disabilities advocate for themselves. So her first job, of course, was working in a daycare. and she didn't like that. And then her next job was working at McDonald's. But she kept working at it, she kept working at it, she kept making more money and getting more experiences. And then her next job was working at Marshall Field's, which is now Macy's. And she got up at 4 in the morning, took the bus, went, did her job. So long story short, 15 years later, she is now the director of our People First in the state of Wisconsin. She's making more money than some of our job coaches, sadly to say, because we don't pay what we need for our job coaches, which is a whole other situation. But Cindy worked her way from living in an institution. She has fetal alcohol syndrome, she has all kinds of other disabilities, her mom's in prison, you name it, she's got it, and has worked her way because she wanted this. And then finally, employment, gateway to a community and acceptance and value. We want people with disabilities to be seen as valued citizens, not as somebody who sits at home and collects Social Security and doesn't do anything. We want people with disabilities to be part of their communities. We want them to be part and being contributing, and that's what Employment First is all about. WIOA, really important, because again, I think this is what's pulling all of these legislative actions together for us. WIOA increases employment in integrated settings, clearly sets the stage that we want people with disabilities working in the community, starting in school. And it significantly limits the use of sub-minimum wage, or 14C, which I know again is controversial, but again, we start where we are and we move out of it. We're not saying shut the doors to everything and start all over, put everybody on the streets. We learned better with the mental health debacle when we just closed all the institutions for people with mental health and said, go forth, and provided no training, no support, no nothing. So we've learned that, but we do need to start somewhere, even small steps. WIOA defines and prioritizes competitive integrated employment. The focus is that. The focus is competitive integrated employment, not starting out in a segregated facility and learning how to work, but getting a job and learning how to work in the environments in which you have to perform. And then it requires individuals under the age of 24 to explore. So no longer can we just say, not employable. No, Dawn's not employable. I can tell she's just not. So I'm just going to close her case and say she's not employable. I'm not God. How do I know? I don't know if Dawn can work or not. I don't know if she's employable or not, but boy, I sure want to give her opportunities. I want to give her experiences. And here's the thing again. We are the enemy and he is us. I worked with a young woman who's 17, I think. I met her at a totally different event, at a fundraising event for the Down Syndrome Association. She was awesome, so social, so excited. It was her dad's birthday. She said, hey, do you think the band will play Happy Birthday for my dad? I said, I don't know, go ask them. And she said, okay. And she did, and they played Happy Birthday to her dad, and she got up on stage and wished her dad a happy birthday. Totally cool young adult. So then I'm invited to Jennifer's IEP meeting, where she sat silently, looking at her feet. Didn't say a word. Nobody asked her to say a word, quite frankly. They all talked about her. And then they said, well, Jennifer doesn't want to work. And I said, wait, that's not the Jennifer I met at this event. I said, Jennifer, you don't want to work? She goes, no, I don't want to work. So I started asking her questions, because everybody there took it as, okay, she doesn't want to work, so let's move on to the next thing. And I'm like, no, what? There's a reason. So what do we say about people without disabilities who don't want to work? Right? They're lazy, exactly. So I'm like, no. I said, Jennifer, you don't want to work. Why don't you want to work? I just don't want to work. I know what work is and I don't want to work. I said, what do you think work is? She said, well, last semester I was working in the cafeteria and I did dishes. And then the semester before that I worked in the cafeteria and I swept the floor. And the semester before that I was in the cafeteria and I put the tables out for the lunches. You see a theme? This is a young woman who's incredibly social, incredibly vivacious, has tons of social skills. And the experience she was given all related to one theme that had no interest to her. And in the way she looked at things, work was that. And that was what she doesn't want. And now we were able to help her. She's now working at a law firm. She loves going around saying, I'm working at a law firm. Sorry for any lawyers out there, but she loves to say, I work at a law firm, and she's awesome. She's an administrative assistant at a law firm. She loves it. She's been there for 5 years. She's excited. So again, going from I don't want to work, let's find out why. Because if those experiences aren't aligning with what they want, then probably that's why they don't want to work. So what does this mean for us? What are the implications for services as providers, as Voc Rehab, as adult service agencies? Well, it means that competitive integrated employment is a priority. It's a priority for all of us. It's a priority for schools, it's a priority for VR, it's a priority for developmental disabilities, long-term, everybody. It's a priority. That meaningful community, inclusion, and engagement as an imperative. That we want people to be part of their communities. We don't want people, the yellow bus comes and goes in school. We don't want that same yellow bus to follow them in the adult world. We want people with disabilities to be part of their community. Maddie, who I'll talk about in a little bit, I do have time. I'll show you some pictures of Maddie, but Maddie is another person who grew up in an institution, and she is so connected to her community now. She's more connected than most of us are. But she goes to the YMCA, she goes to classes, she takes pottery classes and painting classes. She is part of the community, but she's able to do that because she works. And then finally, change the way we operate is inevitable. So this is what all of this means for us. All of this legislation, Employment First, WIOA, really looking at the ADA and figuring out how we make this work, the implications for us are that competitive integrated employment as a priority, meaningful community inclusion, and engagement, not just being there, but being part of your community as imperative, and that we have to change the way we work. We have to change what we do. So changing our expectations is a lot easier said than done. Changing our expectations is hard. We've always done it this way. It's so much easier to do it this way. Why do we have to change? That means we have to change all of our paperwork now, right? Now we got to change our computer system. Yes, that is what it means. And change is good. Businesses don't do the same thing year after year after year. Now, Coke might have the same recipe for Coke, but the way they brand it, the way they market it, the way they put things out there, that all changed from when they first started Coca-Cola 100 years ago. We have to take a message from business that we have to change in order to survive. No longer is it going to be acceptable to do the things that we have been doing because, as Albert Einstein said, although I heard that Albert Einstein didn't say it, but I'm going to always say he said it, that doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results is the sure sign of insanity. And yet that's what we do. That's what we do in our agencies, in our schools, in our states. We keep saying, yes, we want this, but then we keep funding the wrong thing. Yes, we want this, but our policies don't align to it. Yes, we want this, but our paperwork and our computer systems don't align. We want this, but we don't train our team members to do what we're asking them to do. I remember when inclusion was so popular, and I remember going into a rural school district in Wisconsin, training these hostile teachers on including kids with disabilities into their general ed classes, and they hated it. And when we talk through, here's how you do it, here are some processes, here are some strategies, they're like, well, this is just common sense. Of course, this makes sense. But they were never trained. They were never taught. They were just told, you're going to do this, and you're going to have all these kids in your classroom now. And they were like, hold your horses. We're doing the same thing in adult services. So we're telling people who may be working in facility-based services, and we're scaring people going, okay, you're going to lose your job because we're not going to have a facility anymore. And people are like, holy crap, I need my job. No, it's not that they're going to lose their job. It's that their job is going to look different. Their job is now going to be in the community. It's not going to be in a nice building. It's going to be in the community. In fact, we don't need our building anymore. We're going to use our building for something totally different. So thinking differently and helping that change process is really where we're kind of at a crossroads. So young people with developmental disabilities will learn about employment options and planning for employment while they're still in school. That's a huge change. We talked about it. It's in the law, but we don't really do anything. We say we can't. And in many cases, it's hard, because if you're a teacher, how many teachers are out there? It's hard, right? Because you've got other expectations. You're a teacher. And I remember when I was a teacher, I had lots of other expectations, like all the IEP meetings that I needed to do, and I had the Wisconsin state standards, and I needed to make sure my students aligned with the Wisconsin alternative assessment, and I had all these other things. And then I said, oh God, now I gotta get people in the community, now I've gotta get people jobs, now I've gotta, oh my gosh, this is not, I don't know how to do this. That's okay, because under WIOA, you don't have to do it alone. You do it with other people like VR and adult service agencies. So this is a picture of Liz. Liz is still in school, she's 17. And again, we were all told that she's not employable. She can't work in the community because she swears a lot. And I had this experience with another young man that I can tell you that story too, who swore a lot, used a lot of profanity. And so because she swears a lot, and she's got a lot of stimulation issues, so that's why she's got the earphones on. But ironically, like the first quote that I said about the expectations for people with disabilities to work, she swore a lot in school. Absolutely she did. But she's working at Family Dollar, which I didn't even know they had anymore, quite frankly. I thought everybody did Netflix. but apparently, they still have them in rural Wisconsin. So she's working at Family Dollar, and she never swears. Isn't that interesting? Because the expectation's a little different there. The expectations is that, and so what she'll do is she'll scream a lot, but she screams appropriately. So somebody will drop the video in the Dropbox, and she'll scream through the window, "Thank you!" And they all wave and go, "Thanks, Liz." And when they come in, she'll take their videos and she'll thank them again, and she'll put everything back. It's a work experience. It's not a job, but it's a work experience that we can slowly get her to become employed in their community. Again, now she's being seen as a totally different person. Before, she was seen as a person with a disability that swore a lot. Now, the community is seeing Liz, as somebody who's fun. And there was one employer, when I actually took this picture, one employee who said, "I've had customers say they're coming back here because of Liz." So again, the expectations, we've got to provide experiences and opportunities for young adults so that they can experience all of the different things that are out there, because there are so many different jobs that are out there that we may not even know about. I worked with a young man, Norman, who we did some discovery, worked in his community, and he was somebody who had limited verbal skills, very tall guy though. We were walking around his community, and we went there and we saw this next to a church. It was St. Mary's Altar Bread Factory. And I was like, "Oh, have you ever gone in there?" And he grunted, which I took as a no. So I said, "Let's go in there." And he said, so we went in there. And it was this little group of old ladies, 5 of them. And I say that now compassionately because I think they were all in their 60s and 70s, and I'm relatively close to 60 now, so I don't think they're that old, really. But they were putting together the wafer toasts for church. It was quite interesting. It was a process. They had a waffle maker that made the waffle, and so they poured the little stuff in there, and it was a waffle maker, and then it came out, and then they punched them out, and then they packaged them in hundreds for the host wafers, and then they sold them to churches. I was like baffled. I was like, who knew? Who knew? And I said this to the little old lady. I said, "Who knew that somebody actually made this?" She goes, "Where do you think they came from? God?" That scared me a little. And I said, "I think so." Well, as I'm talking to her, thinking about this is such a unique opportunity, I've never seen this business before, Norman is on the other side of the room, and the other little old lady is going, "Oh, honey, you're going to hurt yourself." And he backed away, and he did what he needed. How about if you do this over here instead? And he immediately, he sold himself. They said, "We would like Norman to stay here. Can he stay here?" I was shocked. We did a work experience, a summer internship, and they hired him. So again, getting people out in their communities. I never would have known that there's a St. Mary's Altar Bread Factory out there that made host wafers for churches. Where do we usually go? Best Buy, Target, Walmart, Walgreens. I'm not saying those are all bad places to go to, but there are so many other rich opportunities in our communities. So we also have to change our expectations, again, about competitive integrated employment. So what that means is employment that takes place in the community, and it's the first and preferred outcome for working age adults, and that person is on the payroll of that business. That's a critical piece, because it doesn't do us any good to say that Shannon is hired for a business. I'm sorry, you're all sitting in the front row and those are the only name tags I can see. But Shannon is working in the community, but he's on my payroll. So what's going to happen when that employer loses that contract or that employer tries to do something differently? Shannon's going to go because he's not really an employee of mine. So we have to make sure that people with disabilities are valued members of that business and that they are part of that business. Oh, I'm sorry, this is Michael. Michael loves Legos. He wants to be an architect. He is working at a graphics design place right now, and we just got to talk to the employer. I'm so excited because before I left, this is what I was doing. I went to the Lego manager. We have a Lego store in the community. And years ago, I worked with Auntie Anne's pretzels, and we had a young woman with a significant disability, and her job was to sit out in front of the Auntie Anne's and offer sample pretzels. And the guy loved it and said, well, this is wonderful because you know, it's increasing my profits because people are coming over as she's going around and asking people for this. So I got the idea that we could do the same thing for the Lego store. And so Michael is now on Fridays and Saturdays going to build right outside of the Lego store to entice people to come into the Lego store. And we're going to see if that might work for him. But again, now he's got 2 jobs that we're going to work on based on his interests. So this is about a true culture shift. This is really about looking at people with disabilities in a different light. And quite honestly, it's about helping people with disabilities look at themselves in a different light. So the presumption of employment all means all. It doesn't mean that some people with a disability can work. It means everybody with a disability can work. And we need to have that expectation that you will work. So the Jennifers of the world who say, I don't want to work, we've got to find out why they don't want to work. What is it about work that is not appealing to them? Because they may not have the experiences and opportunities to really make that decision about work. This is really important to me. In schools, as well as in the adult world, we've got to shift our focus. Language is powerful. Language is really powerful. And how we talk about things makes a difference in how people look at us and what we're doing. And so when we talk about programs, and we talk about programming people, I don't know about you, but I've never been programmed before. But I hear that a lot. We're going to be programming this person to do X, Y, and Z. Sends a whole different message. But if we talk about services, because in reality, everything we do is based on individuals, and so there is no program for an individual. Because once I have a program, then I have a program for Gina and Dina, of course, Gina and Dina. Couldn't have planned that. Gina, Dina, and John, and I've got this great program, this great transition program, an employment program, and you guys are awesome and doing a great job, and then Linda comes along. No, she doesn't fit in my program. She's too severely disabled. She doesn't fit in my program. Now I got to create a new program for you. So now I create a new program for Linda and Thomas and Nada. And then all of a sudden, you guys are all good, great. I've got my 2 programs going, and then Tracy comes along. And now Tracy doesn't fit into either one of my programs, and now I have to create another program. You see that? Don't we do that? Don't we have multiple programs for people? It's not about programs. It's not about programming people. It's about services. It's about providing services, individualized services. So we have transition services, because every person who is in the transition area is going to be different. We have integrated employment services or employment services. We don't have programs. So if that's one thing you leave here with, that would be awesome, because I think that language, and it sounds just like it's just semantics, it's not. When people think about people with disabilities, we think of programs. We need to think of services. There's no more asking people, do you want to work? Oh my gosh, I get that all the time whenever I'm in IEP meetings. So do you want to work? No. How many people in here, if they were asked that question, would truthfully say, yes, I do? You know, and this idea of a dream job, I'm sorry, people. A dream job to me is not working very much and making a lot of money. Okay, find that job for me, right? No, it's the ideal job that you really are interested in, that matches your passions and interests, matches what you internally really gets you up in the morning, what you really, really like. That's the job I'm looking for. I'm not looking for your dream job, because there's no dream job, right? So we need to ask people, what do you want to do? What are your interests? What's your passion? What gets you up in the morning? What do you really like when you're not in school, when you're not at our facility? What do you enjoy? What do you like? And then I can build on that. Provide opportunity. We have to provide opportunity for people. We keep saying this idea of choice, that people with disabilities are choosing not to work. They're choosing to be in a segregated facility-based services. No, they're not. It's the only choice they know. They don't know anything else. So we have to provide people with disabilities opportunities. Job shadowing opportunities, internship opportunities, volunteering in the community, but true volunteering in the community. Like I just got an email from somebody from Hawaii who I'm working with, and this poor parent said, you know, my son worked at this place and he earned $9.45 an hour, and then the school came in and they decided to change it into a training program, and now he's making $4 an hour. Is that right? That's what we do. Because why? Because we're focused on programs. Because she needed a training program. Now, how awful would that be that you're working for $9.45 an hour doing the job, and now somebody comes in who has a bachelor's degree or a master's degree and says, nope, we're going to change that. We're going to have a program, and we're going to make sure everybody goes through this program, and everybody's going to get a training wage of $4 an hour. What's wrong with that picture? That's what we do, though. So volunteering means real volunteering, like at a nonprofit organization, at an animal shelter, at a food pantry. That's volunteering, getting people in the community, trying different kinds of things, trying different kinds of experiences. And then community involvement, and not group community involvement. That's the other thing. All of these opportunities are individualized. They're not, oh, let's all go out together, all 15 of us. No, not even 5 of you. Maybe 2, because they're friends, because I go out with my friends. But it needs to be based on that individual person. So community involvement, giving back to their community. And when I was teaching, I did a lot of service learning with my students, with and without disabilities, and I got them all engaged, and that's a great way of community involvement and giving back and volunteering. Culture shift again, working is the norm, not the exception. It's not an option. It's what we expect all adults of working age to do, is to work. So we have this idea of customized employment, and again, I'm using it because it's what's in the law and what we talk about, but I think we need to forget about employment. Employment is employment. If you have to ask, is this employment? Then it's probably not. Employment is employment. I don't care if we call it supported employment or customized employment or integrated employment. Employment is employment. And I think we get too caught up on what's the definition, and what is severe disability, and what is customized employment versus supported employment, and what is integrated employment versus, forget it. Employment is employment. Do you have a job? Do you have to ask, is this employment, what I'm doing? No. So, the old model that we used to have when we talked about employment is the train in place. So we use segregated facility-based services or shelter workshops to get people ready for work. And now we all know, right, when you leave here, there's no such thing as job ready. No such thing as job ready. So that's the old model, train and place, which made no sense because we know that people with disabilities have a hard time generalizing skills. I was guilty of this. I bought a refrigerator when I was a teacher, And I turned that refrigerator box into a bus in my classroom. And I taught my students how to get on the bus and pay the wage to take the bus. They all were able to do it in my classroom, and then we went on the bus stop. And they got on the bus and they looked at me like, now what? Because my little bus made out of my refrigerator box didn't look anything like what was in the real world. So if we want to teach people in the real world. So we knew that this model of train in place doesn't work because people have a hard time generalizing skills. I have a hard time generalizing skills. I can easily do my computer stuff when my computer IT guy is standing right behind me. I can do it just fine. But when I go home and I'm supposed to do it, I can't do it. So we all have those issues, right? So then we moved to the place and train model, which quickly turned into the place and pray model, because we didn't get to know the person. And we just plopped people into jobs that didn't match their interests, didn't match their skills, didn't match anything. And we just prayed that they would be successful and that they would keep that job. And then Pam, God bless her, because I learned everything from the people I support. Pam was one of the first people I helped get a job. She got a job at Target. She stocked the impulse items, those items as you check out that you don't really need, that you automatically need once you're standing in line. That's what she did. And 2 years later, she called me up and said, okay, I'm ready for something else. My response, are you kidding? Do you know how hard it was to get this job for you? This is your job. This is it. And I could sense her frustration, the silence on the other end. That was my aha moment. Of course she wants something else. She's been here for 2 years. Of course she wants something different. She wants to move on to other things, just like the rest of us. So it's not just about employment and getting a job. It's about employment and getting a job that leads to another job, that leads to another job, that leads to a career. That's what we need to move to. The new approach of discover, find out what this person's passions and interests and talents are, connect them to the community by providing opportunities and experiences so that they can truly make an informed decision and choice about what they want, and then support. But don't just support that person with the disability, support the community. Educate the community, support the employer, support the coworkers, support the supervisors. Our job is to work our way out of a job. I never could understand this idea that, well, if I make this person independent on their job, well, then what am I going to do? There are hundreds of people with disabilities looking for jobs. We will never be without a job. Our job is not to be hangers-on. Our job is to help somebody get a job, let go, let the employer take over from there, check in occasionally, and move on to help the other 100 people that we've got looking for jobs in our community. That's our job. So we need to look at how do we discover, how do we connect, and how do we support people with disabilities. So, Customized Employment, Office of Disability Employment Awareness Policy, ODEP, has a great definition, even though I'm not a fan of having to call employment anything, but really customized employment is this flexible process designed to personalize employment relationships between the job seeker and the employer in a way that meets the needs of both. Has to meet the needs of both. It's not just about the job seeker, and it's not just about the employer, it's about both. Customized employment is based on an individual's match between their strengths, the conditions of the business, and the interests of the job candidate, and the needs of that business. I think that's a good definition. And if you think about that definition, I go back to the fact that we all are customized employees, right? We've all pretty much done this. The strategies we knew, I don't know that this is a new model, because quite frankly, 28 years ago, this is the model I used. So it's not new, but it should be universally accepted. Truly, I think customized employment is how we all find employment. It's all about our strengths and abilities and how we can show value to that business and how we can make sure that an employer knows this is what I can offer your business. It really does give the power back to the individual. It gives the power back to the employer. It's no longer that I'm gonna say, Gina, okay, I got this job. Here you go, Dina, take her. No, it's, Gina, I've got an opportunity for you. I'm going to have you interview with Dina. Dina, you're the employer. You get to make the decision. If you don't think she's a good job match, then you say, no, I don't think she's a good job match. It's about giving the power back instead of just plopping people around in employment opportunities that may not match the needs of the business and may not match the interests of our candidates. So here are the basics. Sounds redundant, but I just want to make sure you understand it's no different than what we've been talking about earlier, the presumption of employment, employment first. The presumption that there is no job readiness and there's no realistic. That's the other thing. If somebody comes to me and says, I want to be a police officer, and they have an intellectual disability, who am I to say? I don't know. They might be able to do something within the police office. They might be a police officer. I don't know. One of my friends who has Down syndrome right now just got his driver's license. He was told all along he's never going to be able to drive. We just don't know. We can't put that cap on people. We can't put that ceiling and say, this is all you're going to be able to do. Think about yourself. Put yourself in the shoes of your job seekers. If somebody said to you, it's not realistic, let's try something else. Try dishwashing. Try cleaning. No, because now I'm not interested anymore because I really want to be an architect. And you're telling me I can't, and so now I don't really care where you put me. So my favorite story with this is Digby. He's a young man who had an intellectual disability and a mild physical disability, used crutches. And he had 6 dishwashing positions in 2 years. And he lost them all. He either was fired or he quit. And so I sat down with him and I said, so what are you interested in? What do you like? What do you enjoy? And he said, oh, dishwashing. And we went through this for like 15 minutes and finally his counselor said, really all he's capable of is dishwashing. I said, okay, well, tell me what's wrong with this because you just told me that he's lost 6 dishwashing positions in the last 2 years. So to me, then he's either not interested in it or he doesn't like it. One of the two, right? So I said, Digby, if I could do anything, if I could help you with any kind of employment, what would you like to do? And he said, you know those people who talk on the phone and they call you up during dinner time and they ask you a bunch of questions? And at first I didn't know what he was talking about, and then I was like, oh my God, telemarketer? He's like, I love talking on the phone, and I would love to have that job. And so I started investigating and doing some discovery work with him, and turns out he lived in a group home, and the group home manager said, oh yeah, he's the first, when dinner time and the telemarketers call, he's the first to answer the phone, and he starts asking them questions. So, how many boxes of cereal do you eat? Well, how many boxes of cereal do you eat? What kind of, and the telemarketers hang up on him. Now, wasn't that cool? I thought that was like the awesome thing. So telemarketers are hanging up on Digby. What a great job. This is what he wants to do. He likes to talk on the phone. So we helped him get a job at a local marketing. It's a marketing firm that does calls to local businesses and people in the community, and they're a research marketer. And that's what he did. He went home and memorized the script. We adapted the job so that he was able to do it. And the adaptations that we created were adaptations that helped everybody in the business. So they were all happy that Digby was there. He worked there for 14 years. 14 years, and the only reason he left was because his sister moved him to Florida to be with her. That was the only reason. So we went from 6 jobs in 2 years to staying on a job for 14 years, right? No job readiness, no realistic. Customized employment seeks to individualize the relationship, again, between the job seeker and the employer. And we really look at this idea of not following tradition. So those non-traditional kinds of assessments, I like to call it hanging out with intent, spending time with that person, getting to know that person. Anecdotally in Wisconsin, we just did some small little anecdotal research, and we found that if we spent more time up front, getting to know the person, finding out what their passions are, finding out what their interests are, finding out what they really, really love, that we spent less time coaching them in the end. And it's not rocket science. That makes sense. If I find somebody a job that matches their interests, their skills, their abilities, what they want, I'm not going to have to spend a whole lot of time coaching them on the job. So non-traditional assessments, developing a positive personal profile. This is one thing that we work with our teams a lot on. we focus so much on deficits. So much on deficits. I always tell my team, that's why we have a job. If they could go find their job on their own, we wouldn't have a job. So yes, they have a disability. Yes, they have these issues. So how do we get beyond that? How do we look differently? So thinking about positive things. Now that's not saying we take their disability and say, well, forget they have a disability. No, we take that into consideration within context. But really look at, what is that positive personality? What can they offer a business? And then negotiating and customizing and reassigning tasks to provide opportunities for individuals. These are kind of the basics of customized employment. So this is what we need to have. This is what we need. So this is a little Doberman that said they told me I could be anything, so I became a Doberman. He's a dachshund. So we have to have high expectations. We have to help our job seekers, our families, and ourselves and our coworkers have high expectations. So I mentioned Maddie earlier. Maddie is a young woman I worked with when I first started my agency. Maddie lived in an institution all of her life. She's deaf, blind, and has an intellectual disability. She grew up, if you look at her birth certificate in Tennessee, she was born on Cotton Plantation Lot A. They didn't know she was deaf and blind until she was 8, and by that time, she was so behaviorally challenged, because think about it, you can't see or hear, and people are just moving you around and telling you what to, so she had lots of behavioral issues. So she had an awesome, awesome high school teacher. So she lived in the institution and went to school in the community. How weird is that? So she'd be integrated at a general high school, awesome, awesome teacher, did all kinds of great things with her. And then Maddie graduated high school, and her teacher became her guardian and said, we want you to work with her, and she's moving to Milwaukee. She lived in Madison. I was like, oh, good, okay. So over time, I spent time with Maddie, got to know Maddie. First experience we gave her was in a hospital where she put together the crash carts. So we did it all tactily so she could feel it. First 20 minutes, she was great. After that, she started literally throwing the crash cart around, and we couldn't figure out why. Most people would say, she's job ready. That's why I put her back. Put her back, she's not job ready. No, it had nothing to do with that. When we did some investigation, apparently she was abused in the institution, and the hospital smelled like the institution. She had no idea where she was. I was this person bringing her to this place, and so she was acting the way she needed to act in order to survive in the institution. It's not a good job match. She could do the job, but the environment was not conducive for Maddie. So spent more time with her, hung out with her at the group home. I would come home, spend some time with her. The residents, the people who took care of them in the group home would be making dinner. And Maddie was sitting in this rocker recliner, and she would just be sitting there, and you could tell she was like smelling the food that they were cooking. And I said, could we help Maddie cook? And they said, oh no, she's sitting there watching TV. We don't want to bother her and have her cook. I was like, she's deaf and blind. How much watching TV can she do? And so I went with her in the kitchen, and I said, well, can Maddie and I make something? So long story short, we started making stuff, sauces, soups. We made Kool-Aid. She loved the little puff of stuff that came up into her nose. It was great. She loved stirring things. So Maddie and I, at the same time, every Friday would go to Pizza Hut, which was 4 blocks from her house, and we would have pizza. We had tactile communication. She would order her pizza. We taught the people in the Pizza Hut that they don't ask me what she wants, that she can order herself. And after probably about 7 months, the manager came up to me and said, so what's the story here? And I said, what do you mean, what's the story? And I said, this is my friend Maddie, and she lives in the community, and she's looking for a job, and we're just hanging out. And he's like, you're here every Friday. I appreciate it. I do, every Friday. But gosh, what is she looking for? I said, well, she likes cooking. Now, this was back in the day when they actually made the pizza sauce at Pizza Hut. They don't do that anymore. But so, long story short, he had a child with a disability. And he said, you know what? I think I could find something for her. Maddie worked there for 18 years. She made the pizza sauce. She stocked the salad bar. We set up the salad bar so it was all tactile so that she could figure out where things went. And guess what happened? Every blind person in the community started coming to that Pizza Hut because they could go to the salad bar on their own. She made pizza boxes, she filled salt and pepper shakers. He said, I'm gonna stretch things here, Laura. This was Brian, the manager. I'm gonna stretch things. I want her to wash the windows on the doors because they're all full of, I said, she's deaf and blind, Brian. He's like, I don't care, I want her to wash the windows. Okay, she was the best window washer ever because she had a process. She knew exactly what to do. There were no streaks on her window because she didn't see it. She just knew exactly what the process was. So 18 years she worked there. She outlived 12 managers. And then finally the last manager came around, and this was during the recession, and they said, we gotta lay her off. We just don't need her anymore. So of course I freaked out a little bit and then started networking again. And I said, that's probably a good thing because Maddie might need to move on to something different. 18 years at Pizza Hut, she might need something different. So for the past 6 years, she's been working in the Menominee Falls School District as an administrative assistant. She purges IEP files, she puts together things, we've got the copy machine tactily designed so that she can make copies. And she's been there for the last 6 years, again, working 15 hours a week. But very successful. So high expectations, high expectations. Make your needs known. Make your needs known. It says, I don't think mom understands that I need light up shoes so that I can run faster. High expectations. Quickly, this is Maddie. Maddie did an informational interview of her own. We went out in her community. She went to Fresh Time, which was her favorite place. She was interested in art, music, and in baking. Those were her 3 areas. We went and did some job shadows and experiences in those 3 areas. Fresh Time is where she really wanted to go. She walked in, talked to the manager. I'm talking to the manager and asking questions and doing my informational interview. And Maddie pipes in and says, how many employees do you have here? And they said, 4. I think you need 5 and the 5th one should be me. And Katie, the bakery manager, said, well, okay. And so we did a job shadow, and Maddie is now working at Fresh Time in the bakery. Don't be afraid to try and fail. Failure is important for success. This is actually my baking. No, it's not. It does kind of look like it though. Anyway, this is Patrick, lots of failure, 16 years old, wants a job. I can tell you more of the story, but long story short, in his community, he was connected. He was part of their church youth group, went to North Carolina to build houses. As luck would have it, the son of a business owner in town at TLP, Tailored Label Products, went to school in North Carolina, worked with Patrick, came home, said, I've got this great guy, and I think we should find a job for him in the company. Never told his dad that Patrick had Down syndrome, but Patrick's been working there for 10 years now, I think. But again, failed a lot during that time, but really was part of his community. Try a new perspective. I think that would be a fun way of doing laundry. New perspectives. This is Ivan. He comes from a very large family. We did a person-centered planning meeting with him, brought his entire family. We had 15 people at his meeting. It was crazy. 2 professionals and the rest were all his family. He's very interested in sports, loves sports. 2 of his siblings went to Marquette University, and they said, why don't you contact Marquette? There's an issue with our rec department. Long story short, he is now the human Zamboni. He goes and he cleans all of the basketball courts in their rec center. It's not attached to his neck, even though this kind of looks like it. It's attached to his wheelchair. And the co-workers who work with him at Marquette, the students, love Ivan. And they help hook up his mat. And I think the best thing for him is that he gets to tell all the basketball players to get off the court. He's very difficult to understand, but when he tells you to get off the court, he's very understandable. They love him so much that they've asked him and they've taught him how to keep score for the intramural games that they have. So he's really expanded his areas. Don't let the constraints deter you, and I'm almost done here. So be that cow. And this is Jenna, who I talked about earlier. Jenna said, I want to work with children, I want to be a teacher. Of course, everybody's like, you can't, you've got Down syndrome, you got this, you got that. She is now a co-teacher, and she's working with the K-4 program. She's been hired by the district. She does work in the K-4 program. And this picture to the right is my favorite because this little boy was crying and refused to do anything. He was so distraught. His mom left him. He was really upset. And Jenna just came down, sat with him, and he immediately started working. So successful in what she's doing. So the bottom line is to keep your eyes on the prize. You're doing this for Ben, who works at Stein Garden Center, for Anna, who's in California working at the Gap, for Simon, who's also in San Francisco working at a law firm, and for Jose, who's working at a digital firm. This is what you're working for. This is our expectation. So keep calm, because it's just the beginning, and I wish you all luck, and thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Dr. Owens. Everybody give another round of applause for her great presentation.
Okay, we're going to get started now with our panel presentation. I know not everybody is back, but we want to give time for questions in the end. So we are really fortunate, you all are very fortunate, to have a great panel. We have, first here, we have Matthew Wangeman. Then we have Ginger Pottinger, who is actually representing her daughter. So she will actually be speaking of what her daughter told her earlier today. Sarah Hogan from the Beacon Group, Bobby Pizzi, who is here, and then with his employer, Mariana Serra from the Magic Garden and Landscape in Tucson, based in Tucson, but they are here also. So we'll get started with the questions, and please feel free to just keep talking. And so the first question, we'll start with Michael, if that's okay, and then we'll move down to Ginger and then Bobby. So the first question that we have for you, Michael, is what experiences did you have in high school that helped you decide about the jobs that you might be interested in? Did you volunteer? Did you work in the summer? Those kinds of things. So could you give us a little idea of that?
That was for Matthew, right?
Matthew, sorry.
Okay. I am very old. When I went to high school, I went to a school for crippled children in North Dakota. And I got a good education. I went to Berkeley after high school. I have 2 degrees, a bachelor's in business and a master's in city planning. I was in a Ph.D. program, but I decided I wasn't that crazy. In Berkeley, I did go to In Berkeley, I did go to vocational rehab. And they tried to help me get a job. And they tried to help me get a job, but they just wanted me to be a computer person. But they just wanted me to be a computer programmer, and I didn't want to.
Great self-advocacy, Matthew. Awesome. Good. Thank you. We're going to move down to Ginger. Can you talk a little bit about Candy's experiences? And I think she responded to this question. So what were her experiences in high school?
She did. My daughter Candy is also old. She's in her early 50s. My daughter Candy is also old, I told Matthew. She's in her early 50s. So when Candy was in high school, work was really not important. For some of you, the words may sound not what we should use today. So I will only use initials. Candy was in what they called a TMR class. You probably all know what the MR stands for. And the T stands for trainable. Candy has moderate intellectual disability. She had a mother, a sister, and a support staff around her that said work is important, you will go to work. The same thing was said to her as was said to her younger sister. It's not whether you go to work, whether you go to college, it was where you are going to go to work, where you are going to go to college. And right now, Candy works out here. We've been here for 20 years, out here meaning Arizona. And she works at Fry's and has for 10 years. I wished I could say that she's always had good support within the school system, but she didn't. I'm not sure a lot of that has changed today, which I find to be very sad. So my hope is those of you who are in this room have changed, and you see the good things that all people with and without disabilities can do in this community. When we get to some of the other questions on what Candy thinks about her job, then I will read what she said to me on Sunday. She's not here because she's at work.
Thank you. Bobby, can you talk a little bit? You're probably the youngest panel member up here. Can you talk a little bit about what high school experiences you had that might have helped you with your career path?
Yes, high school. I did volunteer at El Dorado, and then when I got to age 16, I became an employee right away. So throughout high school, for 5 years, I was employee, and it just jumped from there, you know, just making money. That's all I think about, is like how I get to the next door.
Good. Did you, when you were in high school, did anybody help you find a job, or did you find your jobs on your own?
There's a program in high school. Yeah, I went through them.
Okay. And was it, how helpful was it?
It was helpful,
Okay.
but the school got shut down, so.
Oh, all right.
But when I was there, it was helpful.
Okay. So those are some of the early experiences. So we have some people who've been around for a while before the laws were in place, Matthew and Candy, right? But then Bobby, you had some experiences in high school that kind of helped set the stage for you a little bit. So can you talk a little bit, we'll now continue with you, talk a little bit, you brought your employer here.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the job that you have now, what you're doing, and how you got it.
The job that I do is, it's called labor landscaping. I love it. I mean, I love being outside. I love designing a person's house. And I can't thank you anymore between people helping me. That's it. I mean, I just love my job.
Okay, what do you do? Talk a little bit about it.
I trim hedges, I clean yards, I, get debris from other cutters up. Just a lot,
Okay.
We put in fake grass, we put, pull up weeds, just like a regular landscaper does.
So hard labor.
Yeah.
So is this something you were interested in when you were in high school? Did you have experiences before that, or
No.
How did you decide that this was something you were interested in?
What I'd be really interested in is being outside.
Okay, so that was
That's it.
great. Good. Okay, excellent. So maybe your employer, Marianne, yes. if you could talk a little bit about the process of hiring Bobby, and from your perspective, what happened?
So before we hired Bobby, we had already started working with the Beacon Group, and Bobby was the third person to come and join us, all within a relatively short period of time. He initially came on as a nursery yard worker, doing watering and weeding and just keeping the yard clean. And we had some internal changes, at which time I asked Bobby if he would be willing to switch over to our landscape crew, and he jumped at that. And he's managed every task. Not I shouldn't just say managed it. He has knocked it out of the park. Is what I like to say. He did that with the nursery yard worker, and then again when he moved out to the landscaping position, he's just able to do whatever task is put in front of him. Sometimes with a little bit of training if he hasn't done it before. But he picks up on it and just does a great job each time.
Thank you. So, Bobby, do you have support on your job currently? Does somebody support you on your job?
If it's in the nursery, it would be Marianne.
Okay.
But if it's on the landscaping field, it would be my boss, So, yeah, there's help, but like, if I see it, if somebody shows me how to do it, I could compromise the job real fast. That's how I focus.
Great.
I mean, if you just hand it to me, I would be like, what am I supposed to do?
And do your coworkers know that about you? Have you been able to tell
Oh, yeah.
them?
I mean, they see it too,
Mhm. And then they support you,
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So Sarah, you're from the Beacon Group, so can maybe you talk a little bit about the process of helping Bobby get this job? I know it started out as a trial work experience.
Yeah, so with Bobby, actually, it was just as Mariana said, we had two other persons there, and Mariana let me know that they were hiring, so I jumped at snatching that real quick. And we had someone perfect in mind for the job. Bobby came from Beacon Group Landscaping, so Beacon Group does work with creating job opportunities out in the community and getting contracts so that way our clients can get work experience and see if they are interested in getting a job like the ones that are out there in the community. Bobby did come from our landscaping crew, and when he transitioned over, when he went through the hiring process with Mariana, it was just as, again, Mariana said, he jumped right in. Bobby needed very little coaching, Sometimes that differs for different people, but that's why supported employment is there. We couldn't be more proud though, really. Bobby did a great job.
Great. And Bobby, one last question. How long have you been working there?
I just started.
So.
Like maybe 5 months.
5 months,
Yeah.
that's good. And you still like it, and you're still smiling. So.
The thing is, I'm outside, you know. For my whole life, since I lived in Florida, I just love the weather, love the heat, love the great tan.
Which, by the way, you do have a great tan.
But I just love creating from an old, dirty, you know, landscaping to a whole different one.
Yeah.
And that's what I love.
Nice, nice, thank you. Ginger, can you talk a little bit about what Candy's doing now? She's currently working at a food store, and how she got that job and supports that she has.
Well, because work has always been an expectation for us. She receives HAB support and from the Division of Developmental Disabilities. And she's always worked. When we moved to Arizona, we found that to be kind of a challenge. 20 years ago when you moved here and you had an intellectual disability, you went to a day program. And so we had to jump through those steps, which I'm a good rule follower. And so that's what we did, and then continually talked about work. So she had a variety of jobs. We finally got connected with Voc Rehab, and the gentleman that was her Voc Rehab counselor is not here because he was getting ready to retire, and believe it or not, I don't remember his name now, but he was willing, he bought into our theory, Candy's and mine, that she needed to work. So he subcontracted, and I promised him I could get him a 27, that if he just would give her the chance. And they subcontracted with another agency, and they began looking for employment for Candy, and they found a position at Fry's, which happened to be fairly close to where she lives. And Candy really had good job habits. What she needed is she needed some job skills for that particular position. So she had a job coach for a period of time. And once she had those skills down, she's a front-end courtesy clerk. So she's the one that bags your groceries. She's the one that takes stuff you don't want back and puts it on the shelf. She now has, she's been there long enough, she has customers that ask for her specifically to help take their groceries out to their car because they know she knows what she's doing. Even in this heat, she's one of those people that gets to go out and bring the carts back in, and we really appreciate it. I do as mother, and so does she, that if you, when you're at the grocery store, if you put your cart where it belongs, but it does give her a job, so don't bring them back in. Candy gets a lot of support. At a point, Rehab was able to close her case. So then we went to Candy's support coordinator, and I'm not sure which one of her support coordinators that are in this room was her support coordinator at that time. And I'm going to make them stand. Can I do that?
Yes, absolutely.
We have 3 former support coordinators of Candy's in this room. I'm going to rat you out if you don't stand up. All right. These are 3 people that provided support to Candy. And you may want to, and the last one that stood, or the first one that stood, but the last one that she had that's in this room. When Doreen became Candy's support coordinator, I said, you know you will become a supervisor, don't you? Didn't I? And I think I said that probably to all the others, which they all now are. Anyway, we went to her meeting. She was able to get long-term supports through DDD for supported employment. She has her job coach comes, she gets 1 hour, she gets 2 hours a week, but 1 hour she comes, the job coach comes and checks with her. I pulled in a chip because I happen to be one of those people that have learned over the years that you make friends, you don't make enemies. And so I called the executive director at Gompers and said, Candy needs a job coach. And they were willing, and I know they lose money. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind, they're not making money on my daughter. But having that 1 hour a week support, and the support's for her. She knows her job. The support is to answer any questions she has, to check with her employer to make sure if there's something new that gets added to her job, that they can help her figure out what it is. But the biggest support she gets is from her coworkers and her employers, her supervisors. And if you shop at a Fry's store, you know, supervisors move. None of them stay there very long. They go from one store to another store. And sometimes the employees kind of churn too. But she has a lot of people that have been in this store for a long time. And I had one of the employees say to me the other day, you know, in the 10 years Candy has been here, she has done more for this store than we have done for her.
That's pretty powerful. Very powerful. That's awesome. So she has natural support. So really, the people there support her on her job.
The people there support her, and she is up here now.
Yes.
There's Candy. You know, and gas was a little more expensive when that was taken. And she's a big Cardinals fan. She's going to have a very tough time this season. And that's her dog. Sadly, the dog died. She was 11 years old and she died in May, so now we're looking for another dog for Candy. Candy lives in an independent living environment. She does not have a roommate. She does quite well. She has HAB support, which lets her be able to go to the grocery. She doesn't drive. She has learned to adapt in reading. She does not know how to read, but she can fool probably most of you in this room. And her support person makes sure she gets to the grocery store, helps her with meal planning and preparation. She still hates the stove. Heat's just not something she likes to be around when it comes to that stove. But work gives her meaning in life. And I really truly believe every person sitting in this room went to work for one of two reasons. You needed to make money, or you needed some meaning in your life. And both of those are important to Candy. And I believe they're important to every person who has a disability and those of us who don't.
Matthew, can you talk a little bit about your career path? I know that you're an instructor at the University of Northern Arizona. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your career path, how you got there, who supports you on your job?
That is an interesting story. I was on the old DD Council in Arizona. And the director of IHD was also on that council with me. One day he said, Matthew, if Ph.D. writes this grant, will you come work on it? And I said yes. Because I needed a job that paid. And the grant was very boring, and I really did not like it, but, oh no, sorry. And I really did not like it because I did not get to, because I did not get to interact with students. But somehow, I went ahead and suggested a minor in suggested a minor in disability. Disability, a minor in disability studies, and I did. And I did not And I did not expect they were listening. But they were, and I did not expect to be teaching. But I know that I can knew. I knew it. But I knew if they were doing a minor in disability studies, I needed to be involved.
That's great. That's a great story, Matthew. So, Matthew, as a colleague who also works at the university level, I just want to compare notes here. So, what's the hardest part of your job at the university level?
not getting paid what I should.
I'm with you. I'm with you. Excellent. Just wanted to see if it was the same here in Arizona. So the hardest part, yes.
Oh, he also says, and I. And I hate grading.
Oh, yeah, I know. The assignments are always much better when you give them than when you have to grade them, right? Yeah. So what's the favorite part of your job?
Interacting with students. Because they because they see me with as just their professor. Because they see me as just their professor and and to me, if we really want to change things, we need to change perspectives.
Nice. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So Ginger, Candy, does she have hard parts of her job and who supports her on those? And does she have a favorite part of her job that she has?
Oh, I'm not sure I asked her that particular question. I think she likes all parts of her job. The people that support her the most, as I said before, are her coworkers and her supervisors. She's had to work through some relationships. When she first went to work, there was one particular checker that she did not get along well with, and we spent lots of time talking about, you're not going to like every person you ever work with. Just doesn't work that way, but you have to work with everybody you work with, and there are things you have to ignore. She has learned over time to be able to go to her supervisor, because I always tell her, as I believe her job coach does, you go to the supervisor, you don't go to one of your colleagues particularly. If you're having a problem with another colleague, go to your supervisor. And they have learned to help Candy kind of work through those things that are important and those things that are not. Probably on a developmental level, Candy's 54. I was 12 when I had her. She probably, and I compare her to my grandchildren, except they're getting older, they're 21 and 17, so it gets harder now to compare her to the boys. She probably developmentally, emotionally operates on about a 11, 12, 13-year-old, so think of a pre-adolescent. But yet, she's also very much an adult. And she expects to be treated as an adult. And in these 10 years at Fry's, she has trained her employees, co-employees, and her supervisors to treat her as an adult. I have always said, her job, she loves her job. She loves all parts of it. She doesn't like the heat in Arizona when it's 100 and some outside and she's out there getting those carts. But that's part of her job. She doesn't. She gets angry when other employees push that off onto her. And they do. And she has learned how to deal with that. We need to change our language. We need to talk about adults as adults. We need to talk about employment as employment. From a mother's perspective, and this is not a question, but I'm going to give it anyway.
No, that's good.
It would be easier on me if Candy lived in a group home. And if Candy went to a sheltered workshop / or a day program, it would be. Would it be easier on Candy? No. This is a lifelong commitment. It's a family commitment. We left Kansas and moved to Arizona because her sister and brother-in-law moved out here. And Christy had my first grandson 21 years ago. And it dawned on me, I could be Grandma Ginger and she can be Aunt Candy living in Kansas. Or we can move to Arizona and this grandson, and now my second grandson, can know what's important to Candy, their Aunt Candy, and their Grandma Ginger. Because they're going to make the decisions someday. And I have promised both of them that I will come back and haunt them. They don't do what it is they're supposed to do. And we have been very lucky. We've had a great team. I'm pointing to these wonderful women back here that have helped. You know, we're not everybody's that lucky. Candy's support people in her home have been with her for, one of them 20 years. One of them for 15 years. The other one for almost 10 years. That doesn't happen, and I understand that. One of the reasons it happens is because I support them, I care about them, I make their job as easy as I can for them, because then they provide good support to my daughter. And she is independent. And she loves her job. Job is important. If you don't hear anything else from any of us, work is important. It gives you self-worth. What are you asked when you meet somebody for the first time? What do you do?
Yeah. And I think the family perspective is super important because it's a lifelong commitment for parents. And I think you make a really good point that it is easier. But if we take that easy path, then we're really not respecting the lives of your daughter, of somebody like your daughter. So I think that's a great perspective. Bobby, talk a little bit about the hardest part of your job and what you like the most about your job.
There is no hard.
No hard? Wow, I want your job.
What I like about the job is waking up every day and just being blessed that you have a job. Because it could come and it could go. That's it. I mean, that's what I'm blessed for.
Well, well said, well said. Mariana, maybe since we have you on the panel as an employer, and then I'd like to open it up for questions, but from an employer's perspective, what advice would you give the people in the room about how we support individuals and how we work with employers in the business community, and advice to employers about hiring a diverse workforce? I'm putting her on the spot. I didn't tell her I was going to ask that question.
So she didn't warn me about that. Can I sort of like expand on that maybe a little bit? I have just a little story that I want to tell you. We do have a rather diverse workforce. Not only people with disabilities, we have people who have had other troubles in their lives, and the only type of work that they can find is physical labor work because other people may not trust them. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it does not, but at the same time we've seen a lot of people flourish because they've been given an opportunity and they've been able to find their niche. It's also harder and harder to find people who want to show up to work. Bobby is special because he wants to come to work every day, because he not only can tolerate the heat, he knows how, it sounds funny, but in our business, being able to handle the heat, being outside all day, sometimes his job exceeds 8 hours a day in the heat. He has to be prepared to take care of himself in that heat and be able to continue working, and it is hard physical work. And he comes back every day smiling. Not everyone can do that. And not everyone shows up to work every day. Sometimes they show up late, sometimes they just don't show up at all and you don't hear from them. And a couple months ago, a young person walked into our storefront and approached me and said, "Hi, I'm here for an interview." And I was thinking in my head, gosh, I haven't called anyone for quite a while. I'm thinking maybe 2 or 3 months for an interview. And I'm the one who does the hiring, so I knew there wasn't anyone else that called. So I said, "Well, that's great. Would you like to fill out an application?" And that person said, "Oh, I've already filled out an application. Someone called me for an interview." And I apologized. I said, "Gosh, I'm not sure who you spoke to, but we've already finished all of our hiring, and that was quite some time ago." They looked very disappointed. They say, "Oh, goodness. Well, you know, it was at least a month ago that somebody called me for the interview." This is a true story. This really happened just a short while ago. And that is what a lot of employers are facing in the workforce nowadays. People don't show up when they're expected to. They don't call. They just go on their merry way, whatever is working for their own schedule. It won't work for us. We have a living inventory. We have plants that will die if they don't get watered once or twice a day, so having people show up is extremely important. Working with someone with disabilities, I believe it was said earlier, you were talking about people not being job ready. No one is job ready. Every person needs a little bit of training. Some people need more than others. But if you have people that are going to show up to work every day when they're expected, and you can train them how to do something that the way that you want it done, and you don't have turnover, you actually save a lot in the long run. Plus you have people that want to be in your employ, they're happy where they're at, and you have a happy staff, people getting along, and it's really a wonderful thing when you have that going on.
Thank you. Let's open it up for questions now from you all. I mean, you have this great panel of people. You've got people who've lived the experience that we're trying to replicate for all people with disabilities. So questions from the audience. Don't be shy. Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning. This question is directed to Ginger. One of my challenges as a support coordinator is getting parents to become more comfortable with the thought of their child going out in the workforce. What suggestions can you give me that I can pass on?
Try to take it back to them. The first time they went out on their first job, you know, what they were afraid of. That's always probably the hardest thing, is to, we have a tendency to be overprotective, and especially of our sons and daughters who have disabilities. So it's getting them to move past that. And if you could find another parent, in my opinion, that could give them support, and I have always said I'm willing to talk to anybody. I really am. You know, I had wonderful mentors as Candy was growing up. And if it would not have been for them, because we felt like we were swimming upstream most of the time. So find somebody who does and ask them, would you mind talking to? And then ask that other mom or dad. I know they worry about a variety of things, and I could probably answer all those questions and relieve almost all of those things that they worry about. I mean, from exploitation to money to losing my benefits to, you know, all of those things. How are they going to make it out there? I mean, we've worked through those. So find somebody they can interact with.
Thank you. Other questions?
Just a comment.
One second.
Thank you for sharing your stories.
Question?
Good morning. First of all, what's the name of the landscaping company? I have some work that I need done.
Thank you. It's the Magic Garden Nursery and Landscape in Tucson. We're not related to Magic Gardens in the Phoenix area, which I'm sure is also equally fabulous.
And I just want to say, that's exactly what should happen, is we should, as a society, be supporting those employers who hire people with disabilities. So glad you asked that. If you were in Wisconsin, I'd be hiring you too. So, right. Or Maryland, or California.
So, given the maybe advanced experience that some of you have had, some of you may not have had the benefit of transition planning in high school. So Bobby, I don't know if you did, but I'm curious as to what if any, services or events or people in your high school experience helped you to learn skills that you're applying in your job now. Let me know if you need me to rephrase that.
I didn't have any experience of landscaping. When I grew up in Florida, I just did yard work for my parents. No skills, no nothing. I just started cutting everything. I mean, I didn't even know what plants was. I didn't even know if they were coming back. Yeah, I just cut everything. The grass, everything. But, you know, when I came out here, I was like, all right, you know, I could tolerate the heat some more. So I went to Beacon Group and became more landscaping skills. And then I went to Magic Garden, and that's when I got more skills. So, and I'm happy where I am.
Bobby, what year did you graduate high school?
04.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right. So did you have any transition planning when you graduated in Florida?
No, I graduated here.
Okay, so did you have a teacher who sat with you and said, let's take a look at your options for when you graduate?
No. When I graduated, it was really quick because it was only 200 students who were in between, you know, very bad, you know, from big high school to a small high school. When I went to age 16, I didn't even care about anything. All I cared about was like, okay, how am I gonna get a job? How am I gonna get my foot in that door? That's how I started, is volunteering. And that's when El Dorado in Tucson, the boss was very successful. Yeah. Yeah, it was El Dorado Hospital. Yeah. And then from there, age 17, 5 years later after that, that's how I came that part of community. And then after that, never got fired, still working.
That says a lot.
Yeah.
That says a lot, Bobby. Awesome.
Morning.
have an online question. I'd like to ask an online question.
Yes.
Maxine says, I work with students with emotional disabilities that are learning about student-led IEPs and working on the transition portion. Many of them are 14, 15, 16 years old. They say they do not want to work or do not get involved in the community. What services are here in Arizona that I can use to help direct them to find appropriate work services and places to help them develop those skills?
So I can start by using your pre-employment transition services through vocational rehabilitation, because they need to start working with youth prior to graduation. So age 14 is when they should be starting to work with youth. So I would connect with your vocational rehabilitation agency and look at pre-employment transition services, job counseling, job shadowing, work-based learning experiences. All of those things will help build those opportunities. But I don't know if the Beacon group would have, the Beacon group, Sarah from the Beacon group. I don't know if you have specifics for Arizona?
We did just start a TTE program, which is Transition to Employment. It's new, but basically we've worked out with several places in Tucson where we go out and we do job shadow. And so our clients will go along and they'll job shadow in the community, see if these places are somewhere they might be interested in. We help with computer skills, resume skills, help them with building a resume, and also job search. And we do individualize these searches because it's something that is important to not only to us, but especially to our clients, because it's just like, as you said, if they're not interested, they don't want to work there, then they're probably not going to be there long. Mm-hmm. So it's about finding what they want, and then again helping to assist create these opportunities. I do think we're still in the dark ages in a sense, but coming forward into a better era where people are more accepting of persons with disability. And some of my clients, they really are, they're some of the hardest working people that I've come to know. It's created a new respect. Mm-hmm. And I try not to get emotional when I talk about it, but great people, dedicated, hardworking, and they do want to be there. So it's definitely worthwhile for all places to consider hiring persons with disability.
In one of my previous lives, I work as the parent liaison for Deer Valley Unified School District. And one of the things that was introduced to me was Project Search. If you've not heard of it, both in the Tucson area and in the Phoenix area, you need to check that out. It is a wonderful program, and employment is their major thing they do, and they start working with students and school systems when students are young. They are a national-wide program. You've probably heard of Project Search. Other than that, I'm not sure that I'm aware of anything else other than maybe our local providers, but you need to find one that's has an employment bent to who they are, and that means in the community, real work, real salary, low wages, not piecework, not a day program, not a sheltered workshop. And now I've done my...
Yeah. So I think the other thing is that we tend to forget that, again, going back to Jennifer's story, so I think this person was working with kids with emotional behavioral disabilities, you said, mental health issues. Yeah. I think what happens is, again, going back to my story about Jennifer, we have to remember that we start, unfortunately, so I sort of have this flow chart of exposure, interest, motivation, and job. And what we tend to do with young adults, and particularly young adults with emotional and behavioral disabilities or mental health issues, is we start with that motivation. And that's the wrong place to start. We have to start with exposure, because exposure leads to interests. Without interest, you can't have motivation. So if we start with motivation and say, well, they're just not motivated to work, they don't want to work, then you're back to the Jennifer story of I don't want to work, without finding out why she doesn't want to work or why they don't want to work. They don't want to work for a variety of reasons, so let's find out that why. I think the big question we should always be asking is why? Why do you not want to work? Why do you like this instead of that? Why? I think that why question is really important. So exposure leads to interest, then interest builds motivation. So don't just start with the motivation and say they're not motivated. Start with that exposure first. Build on those interests so that you can find those areas, like with Maddie, it was art, music, and baking. Those were her 3 areas. Okay, great. I can go with that. She's got interest. So now I can lead to that motivation. That will then build into employment. So I think if you followed that, I think that would be helpful. I have one last question. Matthew, we're going to start with you. My last question is we have teachers, providers, voc rehab counselors. This is your chance to give words of wisdom and advice for all of us in this room on what you would like to tell us about how we can better support and build a community that leads to employment for all people.
Never assume anything about a person with a disability. Like I am a dad. I think that is the biggest problem in this society. We assume people with significant disabilities cannot do anything, and we don't value them.
Thank you. Thank you. Just real quickly, Ginger, just quick words of advice.
If you work with families who have young children, talk to them about work. Talk to them about what they expect their son or daughter to do. As you said, exposure. When you're driving down the street, there's a bank. Maybe I can work in the bank. Have the same expectation for people with disabilities as you have for people without disabilities.
Great. Thank you. Bobby? Words of advice for us professionals in the room?
Words of advice, what I see it is, it's just a door. People with disability or people with non-disability have opportunities as much as anybody else. All you gotta do is go right through that door. And help will ask for it, you know? All you gotta do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bobby. Can we have a round of applause for our panelists? So I'd like to bring Erica back up to close us out.
Thank you. All right. Thank you all so much for coming today. Before we finish wrapping this up, I just want to mention that you all are going to be getting evaluations, if you haven't already, the people online. So to avoid us harassing you with all constant emails about filling out your evaluation, please fill out those evaluations, okay? Because this is how we're going to be able to tell if this is effective, if we should do this again in the future. And so please, 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 please do this evaluations. Because we don't want to see that we got 5 people who filled it out. Next thing I want to say is thanks again for all the panelists who came in today. You guys were so awesome. Thank you, Dr. Owens. And I want to thank all the people that actually helped participate in this program. It was APAD, DVD, VR, and specifically Jill Pleasant, John McDermott, Tom Uno from NAU IHD. They put this all together. Thank you guys for all that. Rochelle Giles from APAD, and so this is like so awesome that APAD, DVD, and VR are coming together on something. I'm so excited, breaking those silos. Susan Hoyle from Employment First, she's the one that's heading up Employment First in our state. If you guys didn't know, we have an executive order by our Governor Ducey this past fall, so we're actually doing what we're supposed to be doing now, and so we do have this. I'm going to be sending you an email with a link, so if you want more information about Employment First, there'll be a link to that site. Also, Kristen Mackey from VR, thank you for having us here at the space and for helping us on the committee. Maureen Casey, I'm going to have her wrap up because we had Kristen start. She's going to be the other bookend for today. So come up here. Margaret Corcoran, Steve Marcello, who served on the advisory. Thank you guys. Martha Lewis, Mike Leva from DDPC ran all around like he's sweating all over the place today. Sarah Roof, she's also our communications person with DDPC, and Adie Schaefer, she helped with registration. Is there somebody else I forgot? Okay, so I think I got everybody. And just so you guys know, if you have CEUs, the certificates are available at the front desk, so just go pick them up on your way out. Those people are online. Let John know that you wanted to do the CEUs, and it'll be emailed to you, the completion of those. Okay, so Maureen.
So, as Arca said, we're super excited at DES about the collaboration between vocational rehabilitation, the Division of Developmental Disabilities, and ADE. In fact, we're so excited that the West team that Ginger asked to stand up, they brought their early interventionist. They're people from birth to 3, because as Ginger pointed out, from a family perspective, it's really important that we start really, really early. And so at DDD, part of our rollout of the Arizona Management System is that we have metrics. So each of our units within DDD now it has metrics that are rolling out in the next 2 weeks that will require them to make referrals to vocational rehabilitation as part of Employment First. And then when those referrals come back, if folks have completed vocational rehabilitation and are in requirement of transition to employment services or group supported employment, that they're also tracking that. Because as the director said, 13.8% of our members who are in the work age group for DDD are in competitive employment. And we know we can do better. So for DDD, we have set a target for this year of increasing that with a net gain of 3% for this year. Because last year, that number stayed static. It was exactly the same last June as it is this June. So what we know is that focused attention gets results, and by each week asking our teams to look at those numbers and move that number, we can have more people engaged in competitive employment. And to Ginger's point, get people to sign up for the pilot parents advocacy training, because what we need is more self-advocates to help. And somebody's holding it up in the back, that flyer. Don't presume that the folks that you work with aren't going to be self-advocates. Presume competence, presume that they can be self-advocates and they can be employed, and we can move that needle together. So thank you all for coming, and thank you for continuing the work to make sure that employment first.